The little girl stood between her exhausted mother and the rest of the world like the smallest soldier anyone had ever seen. Her tiny hands trembled, but her determined eyes never did. She had watched too many people walk away, heard too many promises dissolve into silence, and collected too many heartbreaks for someone who had barely learned how to tie her own shoes. In her heart, she had made a promise stronger than steel. No man would ever get close enough to hurt her mother again. She believed love only arrived carrying flowers and left carrying broken dreams. But on one warm spring morning, under the bright golden sun, fate quietly placed someone in their path who wasn't there to rescue them. He was simply there to stay. Before we begin, if you believe kindness deserves a second chance and that love can heal even the deepest wounds, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Touches Hearts. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories that remind the world compassion still exists. The morning sunlight poured across Maple Street as people hurried toward work, children laughed on bicycles, and birds filled the air with songs that seemed almost too cheerful for someone carrying as much pain as Olivia. At 32, life had already demanded more from her than most people faced in a lifetime. Her marriage had ended years earlier after betrayal shattered everything she believed about forever. Left alone to raise her 6-year-old daughter Grace, she slowly learned that survival often meant hiding tears until after bedtime. Every day began before sunrise, juggling 2 jobs while pretending everything was under control. Her smile fooled strangers, but not the little girl who watched every sacrifice from the front row seat of childhood. Grace had grown up faster than anyone realized. While other children collected toys and bedtime stories, she collected memories of unpaid bills stacked on the kitchen table, quiet crying behind a locked bathroom door, and birthdays celebrated with homemade cakes because money simply wasn't there for anything else. Watching her mother's heart break had changed her forever. She no longer believed adults when they spoke about love. She believed actions, and most actions she had witnessed ended in disappointment. The neighborhood knew Olivia as the hardworking woman who never asked for help. They admired her strength without realizing strength often grows from having no other choice. Every afternoon, after finishing school, Grace waited on the front porch until her mother returned from work. Those quiet moments became their little tradition. They watched the sun drift lower across the sky, shared simple snacks, and talked about dreams that felt much larger than the tiny house they called home. A few houses away lived Ethan, a carpenter whose hands carried the rough marks of years spent building homes for other families while quietly rebuilding his own broken life. He had lost his wife to illness 5 years earlier. Grief had taught him patience. Loneliness had taught him gratitude. Unlike many people, Ethan no longer searched for perfection. He simply appreciated honest hearts. Their first meeting happened so quietly that neither understood how important it would become. Olivia struggled to carry heavy grocery bags after a long shift. One bag suddenly split open, sending fruit rolling across the sidewalk under the bright afternoon sun. Before embarrassment could settle in, Ethan calmly knelt to gather every apple, every orange, every small piece of dignity she feared she had lost. He asked for nothing in return and walked away with nothing more than a polite smile. Grace noticed everything. She noticed how her mother smiled for the first time in weeks. She noticed how Ethan never stared with pity. She noticed something she didn't like. Hope. Hope was dangerous because disappointment always seemed to follow. From that day forward, Ethan occasionally crossed paths with them. Sometimes he repaired a loose fence without mentioning it. Other times he carried heavy boxes inside after Olivia returned from work exhausted. He never acted like a hero. He behaved as though kindness was simply the normal way people should treat each other. Grace refused to be convinced. Every act of generosity felt like the beginning of another story that would end with her mother crying again. She stayed close whenever Ethan appeared, silently placing herself between them. She never shouted. She never made a scene. She simply watched him with careful eyes that asked questions no child should ever have needed to ask. Summer slowly painted the neighborhood with bright flowers and longer days. Ethan became a familiar face without ever forcing himself into their lives. He waved when passing by. He fixed broken porch steps one Saturday morning while Olivia worked. Before leaving, he quietly planted colorful flowers beside the front walkway because he remembered Grace once saying butterflies liked gardens. The butterflies came. Grace noticed that too. One afternoon, the local elementary school organized a family picnic in the park. Parents spread blankets across the green grass while children raced beneath the warm afternoon sky. Olivia almost skipped the event because she worried about unfinished work waiting at home, but Grace insisted they go. Ethan happened to volunteer at the picnic, helping organize games for the children. Throughout the afternoon, he encouraged shy kids, helped elderly grandparents carry chairs, cleaned spilled drinks without complaint, and celebrated every child as though each one mattered equally. He wasn't performing kindness because someone was watching. He simply lived that way. Grace observed him from a distance. For the first time, confusion replaced suspicion. She couldn't find the selfishness she expected. Days later, a powerful thunderstorm swept through the neighborhood during broad daylight. Fierce winds tore branches from old trees, knocking out electricity across several streets. Olivia became trapped at work because flooded roads delayed traffic. Grace waited anxiously at home with a kind elderly neighbor until Ethan arrived to check whether everyone was safe. Without hesitation, he spent hours clearing fallen branches, securing damaged fences, and helping families protect their homes from further damage. By the time Olivia finally returned, soaked from the rain and exhausted from worry, she found the house safe, candles glowing warmly inside, and Grace smiling for the first time during a storm. Something inside Olivia quietly softened. Weeks passed. The walls around both adults slowly lowered, not because romance rushed in, but because trust arrived first. They shared coffee on sunny mornings while Grace played nearby. They talked about grief without pretending it disappeared. They laughed about ordinary things. Life slowly felt lighter. Yet Grace remained cautious. One Saturday morning, she wandered into the backyard and discovered Ethan carefully repairing her old wooden swing. The ropes had become worn, and the seat had begun to crack. Instead of replacing it with something expensive, he restored the very swing filled with her happiest childhood memories. He understood that some things weren't valuable because they were new. They were valuable because they held love. Grace sat quietly on the repaired swing that afternoon beneath the bright blue sky. For the first time, fear loosened its grip. She realized Ethan never tried to replace anyone. He never asked her to forget her father. He never tried to earn affection with gifts. He simply showed up. Again. And again. And again. One evening, as the golden sunset painted the neighborhood in warm light, Grace watched her mother laughing freely while watering the flowers Ethan had planted months earlier. It was a sound she hadn't heard in years. In that simple laugh, Grace finally understood something children rarely learn so young. Loving someone didn't erase old pain. It simply made carrying it a little easier. Ethan had never arrived to rescue her mother. He had arrived willing to walk beside her,